Okay, Alan,
Yeah.
could you respond to that?
Yeah, I sympathize with what Alban is saying. The dumps did start off that way. I know that's the history of it, and there was even open burning in the 1970s. I remember as a child, every time we drove past the Beetham, the place would always be full of smoke. Thankfully, that stopped many years ago. From time to time, they do have issues with fire, but it's only because it's accidental, and I know that they try their best to put it out as soon as they can. Yeah, I mean, we need to start changing the way we do things and maybe trying to divert some of the waste out of the landfill side, which I'm sure we'll talk about when we get there.
Well, we need to take a short break. As you watch, I want to remind you to send in your comments and suggestions to Cleaning Up the Mess at guardian.co.tt. This is an environmental special on CNC3. We'll be right back. Welcome back to this environmental series on CNC3. My guests are Alan de Beaumlay from Waste Disposals Limited and Alban Scott. He is the Executive Manager of the Environmental Project from Solid Waste Management Company Limited. Let me come back to you, Mr. Scott. Your actual website says that the Beetham and Guanapo landfill sites are major concerns because they are located in areas that are not suitable for landfills.
Well, yeah.
So where does the concern come in?
Okay, the concern comes in two cases. The Guanapo landfill is at the top of the aquifer. The Beetham landfill is at the bottom of the aquifer. The aquifer is an open aquifer to the sea. There is the potential, if you pull too much water out of the aquifer, that you will get some impact from the Beetham landfill, which is you will get some, water moving back into CCs where the freshwater lens has moved. In addition to that, at the Guanapo, there's the potential for, say, leachate running into any of the streams coming off of the Guanapo landfill.
Has that happened to your knowledge?
Well,
you said there's potential.
There's potential, and I think that there's a certain amount of leachate would have gone into to some of the rivers up there.
And how does
there
that
might have been a dilutive factor, right?
But how does that affect our health?
Well, I am not a health person, and it will be difficult for me to determine how it affects our health. I think how it will affect your health is if the contaminants were in the water that people would consume or drink, then you would determine illnesses like dysentery and other types of cholera or anything like that. We have never had any incidents of that. On top of that, the study showed that the main impact of the Guanapo landfill, any type of surface or subsurface, was in terms of BOD and CO2, biological oxygen demand and chemical oxygen demand. And it was not in terms of any kind of carcinogenic effects, likely carcinogenic effects. So that is what, because the Guanapo landfill in the past has mainly, for the last 10 or 15 years, we have restricted what is allowed to be going to the Guanapo landfill. Things like tires and a lot of other things were not put into the landfill. And what is that Guanapo has always been a site where at one time the agricultural department went there to collect seeds for propagation of, say, avocados or fruit and that type of thing. So it was basically a rural site that had a lot of, what went into it was a lot of stuff that would break down.
What we saw at the landfill last week, we saw a lot of e-waste, we saw a lot of electronics. We also saw that because we dump about 50 million plastic bottles and about 10 million glass bottles in our dumps every month, we were told that all this waste gathers together, the liquid comes out of these bottles, rodents gather, the toxins mix with the remnants of the sweet drinks, it all comes together. That mixes with the chemicals, that goes into our water table. Now, how can we actually say that it is not carcinogenic?
I have evidence based on a study that was done by an international company that does not take place. And if you may wish, I could bring the evidence to show you that that impact, what you're talking about, does not exist. What you're coming with is what people have subsumed, that these things are coming into the system, all right? And in your summation, everybody feels that the BTM is the biggest impact out there. We've proven that the BTM is not necessarily the biggest impact. It is not the best site because it's a swamp. And the fact is that the decaying process in the BTM is slow because it's a tidal swamp, because you still have the tidal impact on the BTM inside of there. But the thing about it is the solids or liquids that you said that you saw e-waste. If e-waste comes into the site, it comes into the site because people have been putting them in the general waste, and if it comes into a compactor, we not be able to open up a compactor. But if e-waste comes into the site, it's a banned item from the landfill site, and everybody knows that. All the carriers know it's a banned item. The problem is that carriers do not necessarily observe the protocol associated with the bringing of waste into the site. And if we are to talk about plastics and bottles, the best process for that is to look at the whole question of source reduction. Let us collect the plastics and the bottles where it's produced at the home and separate it. That is what the process that SWMCOL is pushing for, that SWMCOL would like to achieve. But however, it takes time to set that process in place. We are not in control of the contractors who collect this on a daily basis. Okay. Their contract is with the regional corporations. So we will have to work with the regional corporations to get that system in place so that they will be able to separate the waste and the collectors will collect the waste. We have done it before, and what we found was that the collectors went around, collected everything and put it in the same container.
Yes, so a lot of education is required. Yeah. Alan, what percentage of industrial and farm waste generated in Trinidad and Tobago is properly treated and disposed of? Do you have any figures? You've been working with this for a long time.
What percent? Well, you see, at the moment, I would say the majority of it is disposed in the way that is accepted because this is the way we've traditionally done it.
Yes.
In other words, most of it is, once it's non-hazardous, it goes to the landfill site, provided it doesn't contribute to a site problem, as Alban was saying, which is when companies would need to pay for an additional fee to have their waste treated in some way beforehand and then taken to the landfill site. And the person who is generating that waste, they pay a fee. But in terms of what percentages, you see, we're still awaiting the rules again. So unless you have all the proper rules set out, there's not. People can just argue, well, my way of doing it is good, and somebody else can say, well, no, that's not the right way, it should be done this way.
Does a lack of rules actually help or hinder business people like you who work in the solid waste business?
It hinders.
Why is that?
Because once you have the rules established, then people know that, all right, this is the type of waste I have, then I know this is what I need to do with it before it either goes to the landfill or goes to some other facility.
Okay.
And then we could all just fall in line.
But actually we do provide, SWMCOL does provide guidelines. There are certainly a list of the different types of waste which we have listed, where we have stated that they are not permitted. We do not have a hazardous waste landfill, designated hazardous waste landfill site in Trinidad and Tobago.
So where does that waste go?
Well, the fact is, most of the companies that produce hazardous waste, which is the real hazardous waste in the oil fields and stuff, they send it back, they re-export it. Like isotopes and other things like that are re-exported. However, where we have to deal with any type of hazardous waste that has a difficulty re-exported, there are certain techniques that we will employ, which is, for example, fixing it in concrete and other things like that, which will not allow it to become a contaminant to the environment. And we will build a tomb, a concrete tomb, and put it in it. And that is standard international practice.
What you're saying is highly reassuring. We need to take a short break. We'll be right back with more on this environmental series on CNC3. Stay with us.